Welcome, everyone. I'm Ben Schwank, General Manager here at UltraEdit. I'm really glad that you've joined us today with a special look at UltraEdit for Windows version 2025.0, one of the biggest and boldest releases we've shipped in a while. Before we dive in, I just want to mention that we know that our users rely on UltraEdit for speed, for power, for precision, whether that's for coding, editing data, or dealing with massive files. But we also know that expectations are changing a bit. So our users expect a tighter integration with their dev tools and more extensibility. And this release is our answer to that. So you'll see three major upgrades today that push UltraEdit into a new chapter. First is our integrated Git version control. So no more jumping between apps to commit, to push, or to do a diff. It's all right there in your editor. A brand new plugin SDK and wizard. Now almost anybody can extend UltraEdit with their own tools. No internal hackery needed. And then web tools as well, in the same vein as plugins. You can take things like regex 101, JSON formatters, and basically anything you can find online and bring it inside UltraEdit as a dockable window. And of course, our presenter, Brad, will get into all that shortly. Now, if you've used UltraEdit for years, don't worry, everything you love is still here. We're not adding bloat or trying to change UltraEdit's DNA here. Much of what you see today is an optional add-on, and if they're not useful to you, they'll stay totally out of your way. So Bradley Hawkins, our product manager, will walk you through live demos of each of these new features. So with all that, I again want to thank you for being here. Let's jump in. Brad, can you take us into UltraEdit 2025.0?
All right, let's get started here. I'm going to briefly go over, kind of repeating what Ben's already talked about, but just give a few more details. And this should move pretty quickly until we get into some demos of the actual changes for the 2025.0 release. As Ben mentioned, we've integrated Git into UltraEdit, making that available from within the projects within UltraEdit, within the File Explorer, and I'll give some demos on that as we go forward. This is one of the highest requested features I believe we've had for UltraEdit recently, is to make this capability available within the product. And so hopefully we have a lot of happy users with that. We've also got the new plugin SDK preview. This is going to be going through a lot of changes over the upcoming releases, and we're going to be adding more and more functionality to it. But as it stands now, you can create a plugin, two different types of plugins for UltraEdit. We're going to do that live in this webinar today. We're going to create a relatively simple plugin that will show you how that works. And of course, as been mentioned, we have the Web Tools plugin, which is also in preview. Right now, it showcases the Web Tools plugin as it can do right now. And then we'll talk more about what we're going to expand that plugin in the future. And finally, enhancements and fixes have been a significant part of this release. And I actually expect that to be, we always do that with all of our releases, but we really wanted to give some extra emphasis to that in this release because we've been listening to our users and we understand that you don't want us to necessarily be adding new features with every single release, that you'd like us to focus on the features we already have to making them work even better and more powerful, and to address any issues you found. And we really focus on that with this really large set of changes that were all driven by your feedback. All right, with the new to UltraEdit Git feature, you can do all the regular Git commands that you would expect. You can create a new repository, you can clone an existing repository, check out, push, pull, so forth. This is integrated into the File Explorer, which is one of the dockable windows we have that allows you to browse your local file system. And it's incorporated there with status icon overlay, so you can see the status of the repo folders and files underneath it, whether they've been modified, changed, or things are pending. And there's status tooltips as well. They give you kind of a summary of the repos. And we have a standalone window as a branch manager that lets you work with not just one repo, but all the repos that are available on your system. UltraEdit does have a repo auto detection routine that it goes through, and you can turn this on or off. So it's only going to do this if you want it to. but it'll pull up the Git repos that you have on your system and pre-populate the Git branch manager with those repos, and then you can navigate through those and look at branches and changes and so forth. And we have also another dockable window that's the Git shell that allows you to, if you don't want to use the UI that's available with the Git feature, you can issue commands directly as though it were a command line. So let me switch over. All right, we've got UltraEdit. When you first bring up UltraEdit 2025.0 with the new Git feature, it does bring up a dialog that I do not have visible. It's a small dialog that basically just says, do you want to enable Git? And you can say yes or no to that. If you skip over that dialog, you can go to Settings. If I can get all my windows on the right page. Under Integrated Applications, we have a Git section that allows you to make changes to how Git will work with UltraEdit. And you can enable or disable Git right here. And you can set UltraEdit, UltraCompare, so forth as the default editor or the diff tool or merge tool as however you desire. Because we know that everyone who has their own workflow and you're going to use a different diff tool or editor or whatnot or compare tool, they may not be the same one. They may or may not be our tools. I hope they are. But everyone has their own workflow, so we facilitate that here. Once you have UltraEdit up and running and you've enabled Git, I have here my file explorer. And you'll see that I have a folder, UltraEdit default, and it has folders and files in it. And you can see that they have icons on the side here. They may be a little hard to make out, but they are there and they indicate the status of files and folders within this particular repo. You can right-click the repo and select Git, and you can bring up the branch manager, which we talked about. And this lets you look at the repo. You can look at the branches that are available within the repo, tells you what you're currently active. You can bring up various commands. You can do push-pull. You can check out status. You can manipulate your repo in any number of ways directly from here if you wish to. Under the Git menu, you can also bring up let's bring up the status for this repo currently. It will bring up the Git shell, which again is just the command line. We issued a status command and it gave you the status for the repo. And as I said, the Git shell is basically a full command line environment for Git, so you can issue any Git commands you want to directly from here instead of engaging with the UI. Also, like I said, you can issue commands directly from the context menu, whether you want to push, pull, or add new files, you want to change how it's sorted. You can access the git ignore or the config file for the local repo for Git right here. Basically, this should give you your pretty standard Git commands that you would expect and make them available in UltraEdit. Basically, when you do a clone and you're on your system, wherever you're checking out at, it'll add it there. UltraEdit will automatically scan the folder you check out, add it to the repos that UltraEdit is tracking, and then you'll get, like I said, the overlays here in the file manager, and it will populate. You can see I can check here from the repo. These are all of the repositories that I have available on my system, and I can access any of them from UltraEdit and from the Git branch manager or from any of the other resources here. I'm going to jump ahead based on the outline that we first covered and skip the plugin. And what we're going to focus on all the plugin changes and the new plugin items after this. But I did want to touch on the enhancements and fixes. When we, in those 40 plus fixes, I think it's actually approaching 50 by the time we reach release based on your feedback. I don't know that there were any areas of UltraEdit that were not improved or items addressed that you'd requested, covering column mode, hex mode, URL handling in the text editor, JSON formatting, new additions to the plugin and scripting APIs. We also addressed cursor and caret issues that people had reported. One in particular that many people have reported was I'm highlighting this one because I know this one was one that many people had mentioned, was where the caret when you're typing would disappear and then would conditionally not reappear. And we had a lot of users reporting that. I'd like to say that issue is absolutely addressed. It was one that I actually noticed myself and that I found it quite annoying. So I made sure that we got that one addressed. And so that issue is resolved in 2025.0. I also want to highlight something that's a bit of a legacy feature. It's our add help feature. I'm going to actually show you our add help feature. It's one I don't think a lot of users are aware of, but we made a few minor changes to it to make it more productive. And it's something that even today with all the resources that are available online, this add help feature is convenient because it isn't restricted to simply help files, as people might know of them as CHM files or HLP files. That's not really the focus for this feature now. It's from the help menu right here. You can go to add help files, and we address some issues here with adding remote sources for help and interacting with remote sources, and those should now work correctly. And you can add them easily here. So for instance, let's say I've already got these pre-populated, but let's say for instance, you wanted to add NPM if you're doing JavaScript or Node.js work and you wanted NPM available for searches in UltraEdit, you can add that to add help here. You give the URL and the parameters for a search query. You add this into the add help files. You've got this in here. I can close this. And then I could go to, it doesn't really matter what the word is, but you can find anything you want that might show up somewhere, any words you want. And then you just hit F1 and you'll have your keyword. And then you can pick which help source you want to search from that UltraEdit has listed. So if I did the NPM package search, it will launch NPM and it will show you from NPM all of the, in this case, I searched for style. You could have searched for anything. So it's simple, it's useful. It's not a huge thing, but it's something that we updated to make that a little more convenient for all of our users, that if you want to access resources directly from UltraEdit, it's just that little bit easier to do. And as I showed there, they're all listed here. You can access them just to open them directly from the menu. And of course, once you have something highlighted, like I did here, if you hit F1, you get that dialog to do that. So call that out because we fixed a few issues with that, made it a little more capable, and it's been released in 2025.0. Hopefully all of you will find it to be useful. So now let's start talking about the plugins. And this is one of the big items we add in UltraEdit. And I know for a lot of users, this is probably something you're thinking, this is not really useful to me. and that may be true, but I think that a lot of users will find this useful because anyone can access this, whether you're a beginner with working with JavaScript and UltraEdit, or you're a professional, very capable, very experienced. Either way, you can find some way to make use of this. First, let's talk about the plugin types. The plugin types we have function, applet, and control view. For a function plugin, this supports one or more functions. And by that, it means like a single execution, in the sense of you've got something you want to do, like you want to modify a selection in UltraEdit, you want to reparse some part of your file, you want to insert some specific text or data based on certain criteria. A single operation is what this means by a function. And you can add multiple functions to a plugin. So you could have a plugin that has, 100 functions in it if you wanted to, each one doing something different. And those will show up in UltraEdit. I'll show you that in a second too, where you can see existing plugins. We've covered this previously, and there's no real changes to this, but I want to cover each one of these types so you understand what they are. We have our new applet plugin, which is basically a standalone JavaScript applet running within UltraEdit. It has a persistent state while you're running within UltraEdit. So you load up UltraEdit, the applet plugin comes up within UltraEdit, and then it will maintain all of its state and data until you shut down UltraEdit. So that means if you're working with files, when you're working with files in UltraEdit, this applet plugin can maintain the state while you're working on files. So that unlike the function plugin, which simply does one thing and that's it, the applet plugin can work basically as a separate application that allows you to have additional functionality and a full user interface as part of that applet plugin. Finally, we have a control view plugin, which is coming available to users in 2025.1. We do have, in fact, everyone who has UltraEdit 2025.0 can already see the control view plugin. The web tools plugin that we released is based on the control view plugin model. The control view plugin is think of it as an advanced applet. It takes the applet design and breaks it up into two pieces, a control and a view, where the control is all the plugin logic, but it's separate from the view. And then the view, of course, is the user interface. But the user interface in this case is a separate instance, but is also isolated from UltraEdit. And that separation means that you can use local or remote. You want to use web resources, or even link into websites like the web tools plugin does. You can do that, but you're protected on the UltraEdit side because that view is again, it's a complete separate running instance that doesn't have direct access back to UltraEdit. And the control view plugin, we're going to be doing more with, like I said, we're doing more with that in the future, and we'll have a more full-featured version of the control view plugin model in 2025.1. So when you come into UltraEdit, we've got a plugin management section added, and we have a plugin wizard, which is where you can create new plugins. You can, as I've talked about, you can create a function or an applet plugin. This is pretty straightforward. I'm going to walk through this without actually creating one. But you can see you just have to select the one you want, and then you enter some basic information for the plugin wizard, like name, display name, description information. You can set icons based on whether you want it to work with a light or dark theme, and it will pick the right one based on the theme that's been selected. And you can specify, hotkeys and some naming information and where you'd like it to be docked initially, because it is a user interface based plugin. And then once you're done creating your plugin, it tells you the next steps you need to take. And we'll go through this again in a second when I fill one out for an actual plugin and go through some actual code. But that's really all it takes to go through the plugin wizard. And when you do that, you will wind up with a plugin. And if you go over to the plugin manager, now we didn't create one then, that was just a dummy. That was on purpose. There's no reason to create one. We'll do that for the demo in a second. But then we have the list of all currently installed plugins. And these are all the ones that ship with UltraEdit, but we're going to create a new one. And we'll come back to the plugin manager to work with that. But from here, you can show if they're installed and enabled. You can right-click these, and you can uninstall or disable these. And you can delete them too. Once if you can't delete the shipping versions of the plugins, you can disable them. But any plugins that you create or add, you can remove completely from your system. Let's create an actual plugin. Let's go through the whole process. It's like I said, it's not very difficult. You'll see that in just a second. You saw what I stepped through for a dummy. Now we're going to do an actual plugin. So what I'm doing here is, let's create just a default plugin. Let's go to Plugin Wizard. We're going to create an applet plugin. And I'm calling this open files. That's because the basic plugin you create when you create an applet plugin is a dockable window plugin that just displays the list of currently open files. And I'm going to take that starting example and build on it with some additional functionality. All right, with plugin, that's all it takes. You fill out the information. It creates your basic stubbed out plugin. It adds it. It opens it. You'll see I have 3 new files opened, and it tells you that you can try your new plugin, you can manage your plugin from the plugin manager, and you can open the source code to start making changes to it. So let's close this, and you can see that it creates a manifest, a JavaScript file, and an HTML file. And if we go to the plugin manager, you can see that it's been added to the plugin manager. Every plugin starts out uninstalled. That's on purpose. This gives you the opportunity to make any changes you want to. Well, if you wanted to add a new plugin, or bring in a plugin from another user, you wouldn't necessarily want to automatically install it. You want to take a look at it first. So we're going to install this, and you'll see over here that it shows up right here. I'm going to move this a little bit to make this a little easier to see. As I said, the basic plugin, all it does is put just a list of files, and here's the JavaScript that does that. There's not much to it. I can scroll through this real quick. I'm going to touch on this basic example first. For this plugin, it creates a render function, which does exactly what it says. It goes through, identifies the currently open files, and puts them out into the UI for the plugin. We have some utility functions for handling some theming issues. When you switch themes in the application, let's try a different theme. When you switch themes, the plugin also switches to match the theme. So that way your plugins will always look like the rest of the application. Let me switch back to, all right. And so you can see, and those messages that are popping up are actually in the plugin code. That's to let you know what the events are doing, which, like I said, you've got these functions here to help handle theme changes. And then you have events down here, a small set of events right now that handles some commonly used actions in UltraEdit, adding or removing documents, theme changes, full initialization of the plugin API, and then that the full content of the plugin source has loaded. So now what I'm going to do is, you've seen this simple plugin, it actually does something. It presents you with information from UltraEdit, so it is useful in that sense. In addition to this, you do have access to what you would normally expect from a web view application, and that you can interact with it here. Something that I find extremely useful is using the inspect window, which we're probably not going to need for this demo. I'm hoping that the code samples I have are not going to have any problems. But it's really useful working with the plugin to bring up the dev tools from the inspect command. And then you can come in and you can look at, say, the console. If any errors are being generated by the plugin, you could look at the errors here. And then you could revise your code based on the errors coming back from the console. And of course, you can go through and look at what is being drawn in your window and isolate those and look for any visual elements you want to change or inspect. So useful if we were doing a more involved plugin, but just make note of it for now. So we've got our plugin. Now we need to, let's make some changes to it. I'm just going to copy and paste the changes in, and we're going to go from a simple example to a slightly more complicated example that does something that I find useful. Let's switch. Let's see, I've got some source code here. It's really just this existing code just modify with a few changes. So I'm just going to grab that and let's see, I copied that. I need to open. I'm doing a little shortcut to this because we're doing a demo. Typically, you have to update a plugin and then it has to be reflected in the actual running plugin. I'm taking a shortcut that you don't need to worry about right now. This will make it so that I don't have to do any changes to things. All right, here we go. So I can paste in the new code I have. It is a little more involved, but it's not a lot more involved. There's some style information here, adds a few easy icons for what we're about to see. The render function is expanded a little bit to make a slightly more complex UI. You'll see that in just a second. And we've got some additional helper functions to handle aspects of what we're doing with the open files. Some additional functions as well as how to handle opening files, closing files, so forth. So we've got this updated in the plugin. I just need to save it, and then I need to refresh the plugin. And now we have a new open files window with all the updates that I just copied in. And the updates here is now you've got a little bit more of a UI to it. It's a little more structured. You can open files or switch to files that are open. That's why you can click here, you can toggle. So we added command handlers for that. It gives you the name and size of all these files. It also calculates the hash value for each file that's open. I actually find that useful. That's why that's in there. That's the example just for me. I work with a lot of lists of files, and when I'm doing that, I need to know their hash values for verification purposes. And I actually added that because I actually like having the hash value available to me so I can compare that to some reports we have that generate that. So that's just for me. But the point is you can add whatever you want to and have it reflected in the plugin. So from this plugin that I just threw together, added a few code changes. Like I said, the code is not terribly complex. You saw that there's the HTML code and the theme code and the style code. There's the function for rendering, a few helper functions. I'm scrolling through probably too fast for everyone, but some basic utility functions and the handlers. That's it. But in that set, I have the list of all open files. I can close open files, and it's reflected over here in the main window. I can toggle which files are currently open. And of course, it's updating so that if I open a new file, like the one I just closed, the list will be repopulated and it's been added to the list. So basic handling of events, basic UI, but it actually gives you an idea of a lot of what you can do with just a little bit of effort. We have some plugin resources, JavaScript resources. This presentation, we will be making this available. So there's nothing groundbreaking here, but some collected links from UltraEdit that will, some web resources and previously done webinar on scripting with UltraEdit. They give you some resources to write plugins, to work with plugins. We do have a page up, this UltraEdit plugins. We do have that page up on our site, and it gives you a walkthrough and gives some basic information on details for plugins, like details for the manifest file, for the JavaScript file, and the HTML file. That will help kind of fill in the blanks there on how plugins work. And of course, we have some general JavaScript resources. I do want to discuss briefly some things coming up for UltraEdit. So before we talk about upcoming features, we talked about the Web Tools plugin. For the Web Tools plugin right now, it's relatively straightforward. It includes a list of pre-configured sites. And in those sites, you can access them directly as a window within UltraEdit. I use it pretty frequently, the Regex 101 window, a lot, because I do a lot of searches and finds and regular expressions. So I use that a lot. I like having it in UltraEdit. It's a lot simpler to access from here than it is to have flip back to my browser. I also use the ChatGPT window. No surprise there. I think most people are familiar with using ChatGPT or other AI services off and on. And you can see I do use this pretty frequently. I have a large list of conversations with ChatGPT over various subjects that are all there. And like I said, I do find the Regex 101 also very useful. So we are going to be expanding this Web Tools feature. It's going to be configurable for users so that you can think of it in the browser terms of like a set of bookmarks, except that we're going to be adding, in some cases, there'll be, depending on the website, depending on what it provides, there'll be some levels of integration potentially available with UltraEdit, meaning that you will be able to, like, say, right-click in UltraEdit, and we'll have a sub-menu that will allow you to send or receive information from a website that's in the Web Tools. That's something we're working on. Also, users are able to add any site they want to. We're going to work on improving this from being a simple list to more of a browsable hierarchy so that you can get more complex with the websites that are available in the Web Tools. And also, as I showed earlier with the add help Here with the help files or help resources or help sites, I would like to update the help so that instead of launching an external browser, when you select the help resource, it launches the help resource in the Web Tools window, because why not? But the things we have listed here, like I said, we have Regex 101, ChatGPT, GitHub, W3 for references, Google if you want to use searches, and of course our UltraEdit blog, so you guys can keep track of whatever's been happening and changing, like the 2025.0 release within UltraEdit. Just to give you an idea of what's coming up, we're working on this is I'm sure for many users a niche feature, so a lot of you don't need this, but for electronic data interchange, those who work with that, whether you're in medical records or shipping or sales forms or anything that the EDI feature set covers, we're going to be enhancing what UltraEdit can do. Right now we have some relatively simple features and Word files that cover EDI, and we're going to be releasing improvements and enhancements to that so that we have better EDI syntax handling and better parsing and whatnot for EDI files. And also we're looking at some third-party EDI tools to add as plugins later on. So again, some enhancements to EDI for those who need it. For those who don't, well, let's talk about some other things we have. We're going to be looking at enhancing our current Pieces plugin and the AI integration that's available there. For those who use AI, again, if you don't, well, we'll talk about some more things in just a moment. But yeah, we've gotten some good feedback from Pieces. I think Pieces is a useful tool within UltraEdit, and we're going to be expanding the integrations available there, expanding the context. Right now, Pieces pretty much works just with the active file and selections you make there. And again, as I've said in multiple webinars about Pieces, it's fully optional. It is not installed by default. So if AI is a problem in your work environment or your personal work environment or home use of UltraEdit, you're not required to use Pieces in AI, and you're never going to be required to install Pieces or AI or other AI services with UltraEdit. But if you are using it, we're going to be bringing additional integration with that, bringing in additional context for specific Pieces operations and other AI services that are going to be adding in the future, so that if you're working with other files that are open while UltraEdit is open with the file you're working on, files that are in the same folder as the file you're working on, and projects that the file may be part of within UltraEdit. So if you have an UltraEdit project file in it, all of those various contexts can be optionally made available to the AI instance so that it can use that information to give you better responses about the file you're working on. So that's coming in a future release. We're adding an Ollama AI plugin that's to support offline AI capabilities. So if you want to use AI, but you do not want to expose your data to outside services or to a remote service, and you want to keep everything on your system, we're going to be adding an Ollama AI plugin so that you can work solely on your system with a local AI instance and never have anything leave your system. And that's going to be coming in the future. We're also looking at some language syntax and parsing improvements. That's going to be in two stages. One is improving what we already offer, and the second stage we're looking at bringing in language server support, which if you may or may know what language servers are, but language servers are like, I think someone in the chat, I think I saw that flyby mentioned Visual Studio Code. A huge amount of the capability available in Visual Studio Code is provided via language servers. And UltraEdit is going to be adding language server support in the future, and that will bring a lot of that functionality from those third-party language server capabilities will be available in UltraEdit for various languages, for syntax, and so forth. And finally, a lot of our users who are macOS, specifically macOS, but also Linux, but macOS users have asked for features and enhancements and fixes for UltraEdit. That is something we are focusing on. And by focusing, I mean we're dedicating specific resources within the UltraEdit team to working on the next version of the UltraEdit for macOS, and we should see something with that this summer. So you should expect a release, and we have it's not just a one-time. We're going to be we have specific team resources going on to the next release for macOS, and following releases are going to receive similar allocations. So hopefully, if you're frustrated with the macOS release, and I know many of you are, I read the feedback. Trust me, you're not being ignored. We are assigning additional resources and dedicating those resources to improving our macOS build. Before we get into questions, I did want to bring up something that I thought our users might benefit from. Let me switch over to that if I can find it. I did have it up. Okay, I did have it up, I promise you. Okay, I wanted to bring up something. This is kind of off to the side here. It's not something that, It's not directly from UltraEdit. This is from an outside source, but this is someone that we've talked with and worked with a little bit, actually quite a bit. And they have done a great job in producing a book for UltraEdit, Mastering UltraEdit. Again, they are not part of the UltraEdit team, and they're not part of our company, but they are. We have worked back and forth with them a little bit and talked to them, and they have produced a book that goes over essentially all the functionality in UltraEdit, as of, before 2025.0. I assume that means maybe the author will need to work on a revised edition to bring in more of what we're doing right now. But anyway, this book exists. It covers, I've gone through the book. I think Ben has gone through the book, and I believe it covers almost every, if not every, feature in UltraEdit. And so I figured I would throw that out there, that if anyone's interested in something that kind of comprehensively pulls everything together about the settings and options and features of UltraEdit, here are something that's available from how, it's like I said, it's from outside UltraEdit, but it's definitely a capable resource. And now I'm going to switch back. Ben, I think we need to flip over into Q&A, I believe.
All right. Yeah, just a quick note on the book. If you do check it out, you might notice that I'm credited as the technical reviewer. So if you find any technical issues in the book, you know who to blame. So I think we did have some questions that you've answered, but just for the sake of thoroughness, we can revisit some of those. One interesting question about plugins was, can you talk about how to share plugins? Like, let's say you have someone that writes a plugin that wants to distribute it to the rest of their team. How would they go about doing that?
Right now, plugins are very simple, really. You just copy in. There is a user plugins folder in the settings folder of UltraEdit, and you copy the appropriate folder from the user plugins folder to the other person's user plugin folder, and that's it. Now that's not going to change, but we are adding in upcoming versions. There's going to be an export feature for plugins that will produce an archive, and then you can simply transfer the archive file for the plugin, provide it for download, give it to another user, whatever, and then they can just import that archive, and it will automatically extract it and set it up as a plugin. So that's not in there right now, but that will be. I expect that will likely be in 2025.1. I'd have to go check my schedule on that. But yeah, that will be the future way to exchange plugins and deliver plugins. But right now, it's just a manual process of just copying the folder out of the user plugins folder.
Okay, so right now it's a matter of copying it over, and then do we restart the application in order to see that plugin in
Yes.
the UI? Okay.
Yes.
Cool. And we don't have to go through the wizard to import that plugin or anything. It's just there.
No, once the folder is in the user plugins folder, you start UltraEdit, you go to the manager, and you say install, and you're done.
Okay. All right. Going back to the Git integration, we did have one user that mentioned that he has multiple repositories with multiple different logins. I believe the answer is that you would have to manually update your login information for each one, but can you speak to that with any more detail?
Yeah, that is correct. The actual Git login, we basically allow that to be, it's really on Git. Meaning you set up your credentials and everything through Git, and if they're available as part of the repo you have, then we use those. But we don't go through that actual process because there's so many different, people expect different things from how Git's going to work. So currently we support existing Git repos and remote repos and servers and whatnot. So no, you're gonna have to set that up on your system and then access it from UltraEdit.
Okay. Interesting question from Rick, BassRick58. I'm assuming your name is Rick. Apologies if not, but he mentioned that they edit files via FTP on a remote Linux system where Git is available. How would he work with Git remotely like that?
You would just do a checkout on your local system.
But if he's only pulling the files down via FTP, so Git, I'm guessing the repository hasn't been initialized locally. And I'm guessing the answer here would be that he would need to use integrated SSH or a terminal to run commands on the remote server, because I don't think that we support Git repositories on a remote server. That would be a very peculiar use case, I think.
Well, I mean, we support, cloning and checking out, and we support the usual Git workflow of there's a remote source, and you're going to clone that repo and work on it locally, and then push changes back up to the remote. We support that. If he's having to work through FTP, then I would say hopefully they have SSH access and he can use the terminal that's
Right.
built into UltraEdit, because
Right.
that's how I would do it. If in fact that's how I have done it when working on certain Linux systems, is that I might open the file over FTP or SFTP and then make changes there, and then to save that back to the server, and then I would go into SSH terminal within UltraEdit to do a git commit from there. So it's a two-step process. I'm not sure how differently we could do that. There are some ways to propagate commands via FTP and SFTP, but those tend to be server specific.
Yep.
So that we'd have to have a lot of information about the specific scenarios, and then see if there's something extra we can do to make that a more seamless process. But typically, yeah, it's what I'd
Yeah.
expect.
Yeah. And Rick,
Edit through FTP and then go to the server either through SSH and do a commit there.
yep. And Rick, if you're still on the broadcast, feel free to send us an email with the specifics of your setup so we can understand that more. Maybe there are some things that we can do for you. It just depends on details. One other option I thought of is, mounting the remote server if possible, through Samba or something like that. But that comes with its own host of issues, so that may not be feasible in your environment. Not sure. You already mentioned this, but Sam, at the beginning of our broadcast, Sam had asked, "Are you going to integrate language servers?" You already mentioned that is forthcoming. Any other details or anything else further we can share on that?
No, I don't know.
That's fine if not. Just thought I would ask.
I
Not trying
don't
to
know
put you on the
because
spot here, right?
we are doing it. The question will be the scope and the scale, because we're going to start out. We've looked at this before, as you know, Ben, and there's a lot of moving pieces to the implementation. So we won't know until we get a little further along as to what all will be supported. The end goal, of course, is if there is a language server available, we want to support it. But that will not be what we do initially.
Okay. Oh, okay. I'm seeing some responses here from Rick. He mentioned we do have the SSH capability. It's not going to be simple just by opening from FTP. So yeah, you work for a bank, so Samba isn't going to be feasible. Understood. Yeah. Well, like I said, email us with more information. Let's see what we can do for you. And then Doug asks, when will 2025.0 be available? It currently is available on our site. I don't think that the in-app update notification has been triggered yet. Is that correct, Brad?
That is correct. That should be triggering this week.
Okay. Yep. So be looking for that. You should see you should see an unprompted notification that a new version's available. However, you can always run check for updates in the advanced menu as well.
When that's turned on, that's correct. But of course, you can always go to our website right now and download it because it's available.
Yep. And you would just download the main trial download straight away. There is no difference between our trial version and our licensed version. So again, assuming that you're eligible, your license is eligible for 2025.0, you're up to date and current, you can just install it. It will not overwrite your settings or your license or anything like that. It'll carry all that forward into the new version. We have a few more minutes, but I'm not seeing any other questions. Actually, Thomas asked, will UltraEdit ever support VS Code plugins? That's an interesting question. I'm going to guess the answer is no plans at the moment, but Brad, you can tell me if you see any viable pathway there.
We did look at that, and it's possible. It's not very likely at the moment, but it is technically, as I'm sure Ben can tell you, I've told him over the years that almost anything is technically possible. This is a little more than that. It is technically possible, but it would be a large undertaking, and it's not on our schedule at the moment. But it would offer, the first step, honestly, is to get the language server functionality implemented. That actually gets us a lot of what Visual Studio Code offers already. And then once we have that in, it actually provides a lot of the underlying APIs that supporting VS Code plugins would also require. So it's not wasted effort, of course. So you get language servers, that's great. And then getting them would also put us in a position to reevaluate VS Code plugins as well.
Interesting. Check for updates isn't going to work yet because we have not enabled the server flag to notify installs that there is an update. So as of right now, in the future, if you're watching this broadcast a few days into the future or beyond, it probably will be available, but as of right now, check for updates is not turned on. It's not available. You can get the current version by downloading it from our website, ultraedit.com, and just click the trial button or the download button. I can't remember which one that it is. So yeah, just wanted to mention that we're really excited about this update and this release. This, you know, this is our, I think, Brad, you called it a preview of plugins, right? So this is only a taste of what's to come for UltraEdit. We really want to kind of open up the power of UltraEdit to you guys, to our community, and let you guys be able to do some, you know, amazing things with that. And we're really excited about in the future, as Brad alluded to, hosting plugins for download on our website, because we know that we can't possibly think of every awesome use case or plugin, you know, every possible plugin for all kinds of different scenarios. So we're really excited to see what you guys come up with and make that available to the community at large. Did you have anything else that you wanted to mention before we wrap up?
No, I think we covered everything that we wanted to. I want to thank everyone for coming in and checking out our webinar, and I hope everyone is taking a look at UltraEdit 2025.0 and let us know how we're doing, and we'll do our best to get back to you.
Absolutely. We always welcome feedback, good, bad, neutral. Tell us what you want to see in UltraEdit. Tell us what is maybe irritating you about UltraEdit or what you really enjoy. And we are very quick to act on user feedback. So we welcome and invite that. You can always reach out to us at support@ultraedit.com. And I'll just throw out my personal email address if any of you want to email me personally. It's BSCHWENK, that's my first initial and my last name, @ultraedit.com. If you want to drop me a note personally, you're more than welcome to, and we can have a conversation. So, Brad, thank you for putting together the presentation, for going over the new version. Excited to see what comes next. You already kind of hinted at that, so I'm sure we'll have future webinars where we see all of those awesome goodies demoed as well. So everybody stay tuned, make sure you're subscribed, and look for those invites over the coming months.